This is auctionbikebuild.com.
Welcome to auctionbikebuild.com. We're finally to the point where we're going to assemble this motorcycle. We're going to start getting everything prepared. As far as the frame goes, we're going to scrape some of the paint off the motor mounts and all the mounting surfaces. We're going to chase some of the bolts, clean up some of the holes, and this is where we can start putting stuff in. The engine is going to go in first. We're going to try to get the transmission in and the primary cover, and we'll see where we go from there. This is the point where it starts to get a little more time consuming. We're going to start taking a little more time putting it together, so we're going to scratch nothing and we hit all the important parts on the assembly process. So here we're going to start doing it now. We're taking the paint off the motor mount surface, so when you tighten down the motor, it'll stay tight, and there's no paint there to compress and wind up loosening up your bolts. You have your bolts be tight. The nut will be tight on the bolt, but it won't be tight to itself, and it won't be holding down the motor. So we're going to take some of this paint off, and when we put the motor on, we'll Loctite the bolts, and this way it'll stay tight, and I don't have to worry about it anymore. This paint is very thick.
Here you can see how clean all these surfaces must be so you have a nice firm mount.
Ride 'em, cowboy, ride 'em through the rolling sage.
Here Bob is installing the bumpers for the swing arm. It is very important that you do this first, because once you put the fender on and the oil tank, it's near impossible. This is where experience comes in handy, where you learn what parts go in what order to save you a lot of time. If you had to put those bumpers in at the end, it could take you hours. Now here Bob is chasing out some of the frame holes, because the paint is very thick, and if you don't get it all out, nothing's going to either fit in or mount properly. Well, it's finally time to put the engine in the motorcycle, and if you've been watching this project from the beginning, you saw us roll in on a dolly, a wrecked 1990 Softail, and now you're going to watch us put this thing together and be a beautiful show motorcycle for such a low budget build. It's absolutely incredible, but we've written down every dollar we've spent on this project. This is what Loctite is. Very important you use this on bolts that cannot loosen. So Bob will be putting it on all the main bolts on the motor and torquing them down very tight. And that's why you had to remove the paint, because had you just put it on top of the paint, the vibrations would have worn through the paint, and where the threads would have locked tight, there would have been a gap in the frame and the motor would be vibrating. It would be a real pain in the butt. Very important you Loctite it first. Now you can see Bob chasing the threads for the shock mounts, and you have to get all the paint out of there, or it'll lock up on the bolt and you won't be able to get it in, and it'll be a nightmare for you. So chase all the bolts and do everything properly. It is now time to mount the swing arm, and you can see that Bob only put one shock in. This gives the swing arm something to mount to. And once again, this comes from experience. It is easier to put one shock in now, then mount the swing arm, and then put in the second shock, rather than no shocks or both shocks. He's been doing this forever, so you can learn from this, the proper order of the way things get mounted. You can see he just put in the second shock, and now it's time to mount the transmission. If you're building a motorcycle along with us, or plan on building one later, this is a tip you're going to thank me for. You have to put the belt in now. If this was a chain drive motorcycle, it wouldn't matter, because you could just put a chain on when the motorcycle's finished. But a belt is not open. You cannot slide it in and around. And if you don't put it in now and you complete this motorcycle, you're going to rip your hair out, because you're going to have to dismantle half of it to get it in. This is the support that braces the swing arm, and the belt goes around it. So once you put this in, there's no way of getting the belt in afterwards. And once the wheel is on, it's a nightmare. All of this has to come off to do this. So very important, if you're working with a belt, to put this on at this point in the project.
backseat. Taxi man fills her with fear. Only a fool in a maxi is a keeping me here. Dead on my feet, but still looking. Everything cloudy and clear. Hey, that big head, get a cooking. Ooh, the climax is near. One more time, do you mind? Let me ride your heart.
After Bob cleaned the inner primary, he noticed that it was cracked. It was very, very fine crack. And luckily he noticed it. I mean, it's very important that you go over all of the parts very carefully. He welded it on the inside, he welded it on the outside, he ground it down before he repainted it. If not, once his motorcycle was together, it would have been spitting oil out of that crack. So really inspect your parts properly. Bob is now tightening down the inner primary. Very important when you put these bolts in that you put the proper locking tabs on so they don't spin open. It's not necessary to Loctite any of these bolts because these tabs will keep them from spinning. And you can see here that Bob is now bending the tabs over the bolts. Once again, very important you do this. It'll keep everything locked and everything tight. It is now time to install the starter gear. Very important that you put some lube on here so it spins properly and doesn't bind up on you. Bob is now installing the starter, and as you can see, he stripped this down, he cleaned it, and he painted in the black wrinkle, which matches the motor, the transmission, the inner primary, and a couple of other parts. And by looking at these parts, you'd never guess that they were 20 years old. They look fresh right out of the showroom. Everything matches nice. And they go great with the red paint job. Everything doesn't have to be chrome, everything doesn't have to be polished. Black wrinkle gives it a beautiful appearance, as well as easy to clean. It is now time to do the final assembly on the front end. And when we showed you the mock-up, there are a lot of things we didn't do because it wasn't necessary then. But now it is, and you have to install the bearings, and when you install the bearings, you have to pack them very well with grease. It's very important you get it in every single one of them. And then pop it in. It'll keep the bearings from burning and overheating and locking up your front end. So very important you do this. Now, we showed you the front end going on the motorcycle twice. Once when we built it and once, to measure it, and once during the mock-up. So we're not going to run it through again, but we'll just give you the basics of how it goes together. Here you can see Bob installing the fork tubes once again, and we did not put the fork oil in here yet. Bob likes to do it when it's on the ground and slightly compressed from the weight of the motorcycle so you can get the proper amount in. So you will see us put it in later on in the bike build when the bike is down on the ground. Some speedometers work from a gear from the transmissions, others work from the front wheel. Here Bob decided to mount it on the front wheel. You can see he notched the wheel and then put on the speedometer gear. So it will work fine and you don't have to stretch it all the way to the back of the motorcycle. During the mock-up, Bobby had the handlebars completely wired and he decided to obviously leave it all together. So when we did the final assembly, it's real easy. You just take it off and put it on. All the wires are there. All the switch boxes are installed. So easy to do. So thank you for tuning in to auctionbikebuild.com, where we continue to build a custom motorcycle on a shoestring budget. Tune in every Monday and Friday for a new episode.